the City of Glendale Civil Service Commission meeting. Today is May 8, 2024. May we please have a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Tamian?
Here.
Commissioner Hartunian?
Here.
Commissioner McGrabian?
Here.
Commissioner Reen?
Here.
Chair Gazarian?
Here, thank you. Next item, please.
Minutes, consideration of the minutes for the April 10, 2024 meeting.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Tamian?
Yes.
Commissioner Hartunian?
Yes.
Commissioner McGrabian?
Yes.
Commissioner Reen?
Yes.
Chair Gazarian?
Yes, thank you. Next item, please.
Oral communications, I do not have any cards, and we do not have any calls on the line.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Recruitment and examination report.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, this is the regular recruitment and examination status report, which represents the current recruitments in process and that the team is currently working on. You will notice that the team has 79 open recruitments, and you'll notice the division of work amongst the team. And the recruitments are at various stages of the examination and selection process. This is a report and file item. However, if the commission has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions?
No questions.
Hearing none. Thank you, Ms. Adams. Next item, please.
Eligible list established.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, the subject before the commission is the regular report that includes all of the eligible lists that were recently established since our last meeting in April. This report includes the total number of applications and the number of individuals that advanced through the various stages of our examination process. Since our last meeting, we have had a total of 26 lists established. 14 were open to the public, 10 were given on a promotional basis, and 2 were given on an open and promotional basis. This is a note and file item. However, if the commission has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Any questions? Hearing none. Next item, please.
Job bulletin for approval, civil engineering associate.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, we are here to request your approval for the open job bulletin for civil engineering associate in the Public Works Department. This role involves assisting with the development of plans, specifications, estimates, and reports for various civil engineering projects, including storm drains, sanitary sewers, streets and highways, structures, buildings, and water utility systems. In accordance with our civil service rules, the department requests the commission's approval to open the recruitment for this position. It was last recruited for on a promotional basis in 2019, and due to the specialized nature of the role, there are limited number of internal qualified candidates who meet the minimum qualifications. Opening this recruitment will expand the pool of eligible applicants. The job bulletin aligns with the position's minimum qualifications. The Glendale City Employees Association has been informed of this request and has not raised any concerns. Therefore, we respectfully request approval of the open job bulletin for civil engineering associate. We request that it be approved as submitted. We have our city engineer here, Sarkis Oganessian, and our HR analyst here, and they can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Any questions?
My first question is, are we supposed to, there is a separate item, separate printout? Is that a updated version of the item? Is that the one we're supposed to follow?
The HR analyst will clarify the typo that was on one
Commissioner
of the pages.
Hartunian, yes, that is correct. That is the updated bulletin.
Okay, and do you want to please help us identify what's the difference, if it's one major or if it's or should we just follow the separate?
If you notice, I put a / Public Works next to it, next to the title for the new one, just to identify that it's for the Public Works Department. Also, there's some minor grammatical updates.
Okay, so we'll just follow.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Question for HR, since this is now open, under Rule 4, should we indicate that it's open in a probation period?
Open in the probation period?
Since it's under Rule 4, B and 2B and C, if it's open, then we need to state a probationary period in the bulletin?
There is a probationary period.
Is it in the bulletin?
Commissioner Rin, that is correct on the bulletin. This position does have a 6-month probationary period,
Right.
and I don't believe it's stated on the job bulletin. Our job bulletins, I don't believe they state probationary periods.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Russ Kwan, Senior Human Resources Analyst. If you refer to page 18, that's for, the item is police lieutenant, but that is the format for which the job bulletins show up. And it's basically a template that we have with our vendor, which is NeoGov, which is our online application system. And they don't have that field for probationary period.
Some of them do. I mean, looking online, some of the job bulletins do have probationary periods, and I think Rule 4 says you're supposed to do it, so, but
Thank you, Commissioner Ream. I've been here some time now, and I recall many a job specification where the probationary period was stated in the job bulletin. Now, if there is a way for us to have that be inserted, especially in light of Commissioner Ream's observation that it would be otherwise inconsistent or not in compliance with Rule 4, I would strongly urge that that job bulletin be reflecting the probationary period. At the end of the day, an applicant should know that they're applying for something that has a probationary period.
Yes. Chair Gazarian, yes, in the past, you are correct. Before they did a template update, the probationary period was listed there. However, we have been going back and forth with NeoGov to customize the template. So yes, we will look into what options we have to include the probationary period.
Well, I hope that's, I mean, I don't know if that answers our concern. I would like to see this job bulletin be voted on and approved, but could I count on HR to also assure this body that you will make arrangements to notify the pool of applicants that there is a probationary period?
Chair Gazarian, members of the commission, I will ensure to manually input the 6-month probationary period until we solve the NeoGov issues.
That would be fine with me. I'm sure it'll be fine with my colleagues.
and I think the rule also indicates it should indicate if it's open or not. Since it was not open before, then the public should be advised, I think, that now it's open, so anybody can apply and hopefully increase the pool of applicants that we get on that one. That's also in Rule 4.
Can that also be modified manually until you figure out a way to do it digitally?
Chair Gazarian, Commissioner Rin, members of the commission. When we post bulletins open, we typically advertise to everyone, and it's accessible to the public, which indicates that this position is open. If and when we have a position that is promotional only, we make sure to write the language, this position is open for city employees only.
Got it.
Good enough? Is that good? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
I was just gonna ask, just to follow up, so I understand how the city kind of does the process. So once the open examination is posted and somebody applies, and let's say they're selected for the position, once the conditional offer letter goes out, do you guys state on the conditional offer letter whether or not there's a probationary period?
Yes, we do. We state the salary, the probationary period, all of the benefits, the department, the party to whom the person is reporting, and we leave a number to our HR office if there's anything unclear and the parties have any questions.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Any seconds?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Tamian,
Yes.
Commissioner Artunian,
Yes.
Commissioner Magrabian,
Yes.
Commissioner Reen,
Yes.
Chair Gazarian.
Yes, thank you. Next item, please.
Job bulletin for approval, Police Lieutenant.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, before you for approval is the job bulletin for the position of Police Lieutenant. This bulletin pertains to a sworn promotional recruitment within the police department, and per Civil Service Rule 4, approval from the Civil Service Commission is required before posting. This bulletin aligns with the current class specification for Police Lieutenant with one addition. Police management has proposed including the completion of the Supervisory Leadership Institute as a highly desirable qualification. However, not having completed the Leadership Institute will not disqualify potential candidates from the selection process. The selection process remains consistent with previous recruitments, encompassing the application evaluation, a professional panel, a tactical exercise, and a community internal panel interview. Upon the Commission's approval, the bulletin will be posted from May 13th to May 24th, 2024. The respective examinations are tentatively scheduled for June, and they are detailed in the bulletin. In line with the Civil Service Commission rules, the Police Department has also requested that the eligibility list for this recruitment be valid for 1 year. The Glendale Management Association has reviewed the Police Lieutenant job bulletin and did not raise any concerns. Therefore, we respectfully ask your approval for the job bulletin of Police Lieutenant to be approved as submitted. We have Russ Kwan here from our HR office, as well as Deputy Chief Andrew Jinks here, and the two of them can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions?
I do have two questions.
Go ahead.
The first one is about the education and training. Usually when we are looking at that heading, if a bachelor's degree is required, and here it is, there is nothing that says high school, graduation from high school or GED required, because I think it's obvious if you have a bachelor's degree, then you have those two. And I'm looking at other items we're being asked today to approve, and that is consistent, whereas when you ask for a bachelor's degree, you don't put in the high school degree. So can we remove that, or is there a specific reason why that's, that line item's on there?
Commissioner Magrabian, Russ Kwan, Senior Human Resources Analyst. Yes, we can go ahead and remove that. That was just a carryover from the actual class specification.
Thank you. My other question, I was really surprised when I saw the skill. There's only one thing required for this position to have a skill in. And when I read that line, applying common sense and logic in decision-making, I was really surprised, because shouldn't that be something applicable to every position? And I've never seen that after approving so many dozens of positions since August. And this is a position where the person's earning almost $18,000 a month. I just thought, should we really need to write that you need common sense and logic? It's almost like an obvious thing for every position, much less something of this caliber.
Chair Gazarian, members of the commission, Andrew Jenks, Deputy Chief. The You make a good point. I'm not sure why there's only one skill related there. I believe more of the requirements or qualities that we're looking for is under the ability to, which you see is quite extensive. But you do make a good point as it pertains to the bulletin.
So if I may interject, I know why that's there. Because,
Please share.
Because in my dozen or so years here, I've had the displeasure of seeing disciplinary hearings where one of the allegations has been lack of common sense exercised at a particular incident. So while you put common sense as a requirement, you can certainly down the line make an issue if one displays lack of common sense. So I don't really particularly have a problem with that, although I understand that, you know, a job that pays, whether it's 10, 12, 15,000, or any amount of money, should require common sense. Otherwise, it would not be a job that could possibly be done minus absent common sense. I do have another question, however. I noted that the 2 years' experience as a current Glendale police sergeant is what's set forth. Was it always 2 years of police sergeant? Because I seem to think that it was longer than that. Now, I have no doubt that there are those in our ranks, in your ranks, that have had 2 years of police sergeant experience and a number of years prior to that as a training officer or a field officer, perhaps even a detective without the rank of a sergeant, who would make wonderful sergeants. So, but my question is purely from the standpoint of being in that supervisory role as a sergeant for 2 years. Has that always been the gold standard, or is that something that is new now? Because I seem to think it was longer.
Chair Gazarian, to my knowledge, that has been the case, at least in the several processes that we've run in my experience. And it should be noted that it is a minimum. So it's a competitive process. So when you're looking at what the average is, I would say there's very few people with 2 years experience as a sergeant that are applying to the lieutenant position.
That's
But
a very good.
it is a minimum standard.
That's a very good observation on your part. I did not see right above it. It said minimum requirements. I will accept that as common sense. Thank you. All right. Any other questions?
Can I go back to my common sense
Oh, I
issue
didn't
for
know.
a
I'm
second?
sorry. I didn't know you were not done. Yes, please.
That's
do.
okay. That was a really good explanation as to why that skill is makes common sense to be in here. Then, should it not also be reasonable to put it into every position? Because then why are we picking and choosing which ones should have common sense and which ones shouldn't?
That's a very good point.
Because this is the first one I've seen. I literally stopped in my tracks. I think I was walking and reading, and I stopped and I said, really? And so that's why I remember it being the first time I've seen it. And so I do, my recommendation would be, okay, keep it in here, but then add it to every other position as well.
I think that's Russ Kwan's domain. Common sense in every job specification down the line. What do you think?
If
Like
that's
that exception, you know, the line that says exceptional customer service, right below somewhere there.
if that's the commission's direction, we can include it.
Yes, Ms. Adams.
Common sense and logic in decision-making. I don't think that all of our positions are in a space where they're making decisions. Maybe if we're talking about people in supervision or leadership roles,
Yes.
that would make sense to me.
Okay. Yes. For whatever reason this specific supervisory role has it, then whichever equivalent supervisory leadership position should also have it, so we have consistency all around.
Commissioner Hatamian?
I was just gonna say, I kind of agree with Commissioner Gazarian on why that's there, decision-making. I think if any officers or sergeants were applying and they have a prior discipline for failing to make sound judgments, and then they get appointed, and then I'm also applying, but I don't have any discipline in my background, this gives me a good argument, right, as to why that individual was appointed and I wasn't. I do want to clarify something as far as experience. The way I've seen experience written isn't in this format because it creates a little bit of confusion, because you say 2 years of experience as a current Glendale police sergeant, including 1 year in patrol as a field supervisor, including 1 year to me may mean 3 years of experience as a Glendale Police Sergeant. The way you may want to clarify this would be 3 years experience as a current police sergeant, or 2, whichever is appropriate, one of which must have been with the experience of a patrol sergeant. So whether we're talking about 3 years or 2 years as a sergeant, one of it has to be as a field supervisor. That's the way I've seen exams written, so it clarifies as to how many years total, and obviously we want one of those years to have been a field supervisor.
We can make that grammar change, one of which.
Yes, and do we want it to be 2 years, or is it 3 years total?
The minimum is 2, as I understand it, one of which is in patrol, or is it 3?
That's correct. The minimum standard is 2 years as a sergeant, one of which being in patrol.
Got it. And then and I do have just a question regarding how Glendale PD assigns field supervisors or FTOs. How long do you typically have to be a sergeant for you to become a field supervisor? Because I know you don't automatically become an FTO or a supervisor when you become a sergeant.
Commissioner Hatamian, when you're promoted to the rank of sergeant, your first duty is going to be working in patrol as a field supervisor. That is the primary duty of a sergeant within the Glendale Police Department. Other departments, for example, the Sheriff's Department, you might promote to sergeant and work in custody facility or in a courtroom setting. But for us, your first assignment will be typically a field supervisor.
That's very helpful. So within the first 2 years, someone's going to qualify. Technically, most sergeants within their first 2 years will qualify for this exam.
Technically, that's correct.
Okay. And what are some of the desirables, except for the one listed here as to the Supervisory Leadership Institute, that would set folks apart, so to speak? Because you're going to have a wide pool, right, of pretty much majority of your sergeants qualifying.
Commissioner Hatamian, it's a competitive process. Currently, we have 37 sergeants in the Glendale Police Department. So with that, we're going to look at their experience. Maybe they've been assigned to the Detective Bureau, maybe they've been assigned to Internal Affairs, or any other assignments throughout our organization. So we're going to look at the individuals with the most well-rounded experience. We will look at their minimum educational qualifications, but we may take into account if they have a master's degree, what training classes they've attended, and their overall work history. And they're evaluated on the 2 panels, a community panel / internal panel, as well as a professional panel consisting of police lieutenants from outside agencies. So it's a very comprehensive evaluation. So on average, I would say people that are applying to this position would probably, on average, maybe have 5+ years as a sergeant before they would apply to lieutenant. But there are exceptions to the rule.
So that's very helpful, because everything that you mentioned sounds like a desirable, right? Having worked in different units, right? Potentially having had a master's degree.
Sure.
Right. So my next question is as to why the desirables aren't included. So if somebody's applying and they've worked in IA or they've worked in certain special assignments, right, versus everybody else, they can clearly understand that those are the desirables. Because what it'll do, it also, I think, motivate the sergeants who haven't had those assignments to also understand that in order for them to get up to the next rank, that's a desirable that the department is, looking for and is analyzing. But it's great that you mentioned those here today. So I'm just wondering if those would be appropriate to be included in your view.
Commissioner Hatamian, in my view, I think it benefits the department to cast a wider net and be able to look at all of the minimally qualified applicants, and maybe there are exceptions to why we might have an individual who has 2 years, 3 years as a sergeant, maybe has some exceptional experience prior to becoming a law enforcement officer. Maybe they have some experience in management before they become a sworn police officer that would qualify them to work at the management level. So we want to look at the holistic picture and be able to evaluate everyone as thoroughly as possible.
I understand. So the minimum requirements is going to give you that wide net. right? So
That is
you will
correct.
still have the wide net. The desirables are exactly what you just mentioned that you take into account when you are doing the interview processes and the different qualities you're looking for. Outside experience as a civilian working in a law enforcement agency, really high up the rank, that would be a tough one. But I think, and this is again, just as something for the commission to also ponder whether or not desirables that are taken into consideration, especially at this rank, should be included, because the purpose of the department is to have that wide net, and the minimum requirements due to the level of years, merely 2 years, provide that ability to have that wide net.
Commissioner Hatamian, let me ask a question because I'm not following you.
Sure.
What do you mean when you say desirables should be included? Do you mean to say should be included as a requirement? Or, because desirables are desirables, and they're listed, right? Are they not?
So the desirables are things that you consider when you're appointing someone to the position. The minimum requirements are what will qualify you for the actual exam.
Right.
So if the minimum requirements are 2 years, one of which must have been working as a patrol field supervisor, that's going to give you the ability to have all the sergeants apply. Your desirables are what you desire out of your candidate. It's not a minimum requirement, but it's exactly what was articulated today.
So let me give you my experience with the Glendale Police Department, and it is long. It is very long. It's over 30 years long. I recall flying out to Virginia and teaching at the FBI Academy years ago, 25, 26 years ago. And I would often run into Glendale Police personnel there who were at the National Academy, and they were attending that National Academy. Now, I suspect they were not officers. They may have been at a minimum sergeants, and I'd like to think they were lieutenants going to the Management Academy, correct? Because I remember names, and I don't want to name them now that have come through my classes there. But what is interesting is that I also remember over the years, over the several decades, there have been sworn peace officers in the city of Glendale who also had a practice outside of their job as a police officer where they were lawyers, like you and I. Now, they weren't doing criminal work, so they would not run up against the police in a criminal courtroom, if you will, and have a conflict of interest, but they were doing family law, business law, things like that. So I suspect that too is something of value, but I don't propose and I don't suggest that we should include a law degree is desirable or a master's degree is desirable, but I am glad to see that the completion of the Supervisory Leadership Institute, without limiting it to this or that academy, so that it doesn't shortchange those who could not go to Virginia and went somewhere else, for example. I'm glad to see that. But the minimum requirements, I suspect, are not going to carry the day, for someone to be promoted from within to lieutenant. Because from the 37 sergeants that you mentioned, sir, I suspect a good, healthy number of them have far more than the minimum requirements. But I appreciate the spirit of competitiveness, because I also know officers who have worked in the city for decades and did not want to promote past sergeant because they just did not want that kind of a position. And if should one of them before retirement had sought to retire as a lieutenant before calling it a day, they would certainly probably upstage many others who have some of the other bells and whistles based on their experiences alone. So I think we can see benefits in adding things or subtracting things, but I kind of trust at the end of the day HR and the police management in coming up with the criteria. But if there's something that you think specifically we should add, I will certainly go along with it. I was just confused when you say desirables should be included. Well, what other desirables should we include? If you have something in mind.
So typically in these types of exams, what you want to do is get rid of ambiguity as much as you can, right? So when folks are applying and you have somebody who's done 2 years and has done 1 year of patrol field supervisor, as a field supervisor. And for, let's say not Glendale PD, but some other jurisdiction, they get appointed. Okay? And then you have more senior folks who've done their rounds, worked in different units. Okay? And then you have what's called a grievance. And then they'll grieve it and they'll say, well, I've been here for longer than Ara Hatamian. How come he got the job? Well, when it's ambiguous, right? Unfortunately, mishaps like that occur. But when you have a desirable listed as to what you desire from a candidate, and then you have skills that talk about decision making, which, by the way, that is great because that gets rid of, you know, folks who have prior discipline that, let's say, is 10 years or earlier, right? And so the desirables will clearly articulate as to what you are looking for in your candidate, and it gets rid of that ambiguity. Now,
I got
being
that
on the
much. I want to know
being
what
on-
are the desirables.
yeah, so well,
that
the
you-
desirables were just articulated in front of us, right? I don't get to decide what the desirables are because I am not the appointing authority.
Okay.
The appointing authority decides what those desirables are, not Ara Hatamian. But so long as we're here and we're discussing this issue and the record is set as to how not including desirables will allow for, you know, folks who may just meet the minimum requirement to get appointed, then that would be sufficient for me. That's why I opened it up to the commission to see how the commission feels about including the desirables that were just articulated.
I would like to add to the comments that Commissioner Hatami made. I don't know if anyone knows this, but in my professional job, I represent law enforcement and fire departments. I currently am 6 weeks away from trial in a lawsuit where an applicant for a police officer position was not hired and is suing because he was 41 years old and the two people who got the job were much younger, and he now says it's because of my age because I'm older. And so now the defense is, well, they had a lot of desirable attributes you didn't have. And so we're literally what you said is my life right now. And it's like, well, they had bilingual abilities and you didn't. Well, it's not stated as a desirable here. Well, they had this and you didn't. Well, it's not stated in here. So sometimes that ambiguity, and you know, when it comes to litigation, it doesn't just affect the entity, it affects the employee, it affects the applicant. So I completely understand that having a little bit more, and yes, vagueness is good because on your end, you have a wider pool and you can pick and choose the most desirable people, but then vagueness also creates a problem because whoever doesn't get the job and says, wait a minute, I have 18 years of supervisory experience in Glendale and you hired that person with 2 years, then everyone is affected in a negative way. The entity is affected. The people who got the job are affected. The people who didn't get the job are affected. So a little bit more clarity as to what the desirables are will allow everyone clarity of what you really are looking for. For example, you mentioned a master's degree. A master's degree is desirable. Is high, you know, maybe it's not highly desirable, but is desirable. Does that mean that 17 of those 37 people won't apply because they don't have a master's degree? Not necessarily. It's just desirable. Bilingual, you know, ability to have is that necessary? I don't know. But just certain things that you mentioned, you know, prior leadership experience or 3 years leadership experience, whether it's inside or outside, whatever it is. A little bit more clarity will really help everyone to just understand what is where the decision making and how it's happening and what you're looking for.
I'm going to go to Commissioner Ream, and I have some comments to make as to adding other desirable qualities, if you will. Go ahead.
Well, interesting points all around. I'm the newest guy here, so what do I know about any of this? But so I'm looking at the classifications and bulletins, and they all say an equivalent combination of experience. It can be substituted, and I'm going, what do I make of this? And it's like it's really vague, but it leads to flexibility. So But then in researching it more and reading some case law, I'm thinking, well, this is just to get in the door. This is just to get into the examination process. And there is an examination process, and there's going to be objective criteria, and that's going to lead to people being the group of three. And so I think that there's this balance, and I think you can, if you're going to say this is desirable, then you have to eliminate equivalent combination clauses from everyone, because that's the ultimate, it kills every requirement. So I'm leaning in favor of, I think, the inclination of the chairperson, which is leave it as it is and approve it, because there's just too many things that are uncertain, and there's a balance, I think. And this, again, this is just getting in the door for the examination process, if I'm correct, right?
So this is what I want to say. It is very tempting for me when I sit here, whether it was today or a decade ago, to try and get into your business. It just is, because Commissioner Hatamian makes excellent points. And in fact, all the commissioners here, when they speak, they make points. I go, well, I agree with that. But then the minute I start agreeing with every point every colleague of mine makes, I realize that we are substituting our ultimate judgment with that of the petitioner who seeks approval for a job specification. So let me address a couple of the concerns that I heard. As far as bilingual as being desirable or highly desirable or at all, it's not in here, but it was
It's just an
discussed. It
example.
was an
I'm not
example.
saying it is, I'm
It was
just,
an example. So now, in my humble opinion, and nothing to do with my fellow commissioner's opinion, that would be a terrible example. Why would it be a terrible example? It would be a great example for an officer to be hired who is bilingual. It'd be a great example for a sergeant who's going to supervise and be on the field and interact with the public. But I know the Glendale Police Department perhaps better than anybody on this dais, other than perhaps the Deputy City Attorney. And the city of the Glendale's Police Department lieutenants are management positions, and they essentially manage the sergeants, and they don't really interact with public unless they appear at city events, in which case, we hope that our public speaks English enough, and we shouldn't saddle with our management level lieutenants, with having to know a second language. And I say that as English being my fourth language. So I don't have a problem with some of the things not being here. What I do have a problem is I did not recall what specifically you said, Deputy Chief, right?
Yes.
Deputy Chief Jenks. What specifically you said that Commissioner Hatamian said, well, whatever Deputy Chief Jenks said it should be in the desirables perhaps. I don't remember what you said. If you did, I would say, yeah, put it in there.
Yeah, Commissioner Gazarian, so bilingual bonus is a bonus. It's not a desirable or a minimum requirement. That's a bonus that departments give to everyone. So we can put the bilingual bonus aside, because what was mentioned was a desirable where somebody has worked different units, okay?
I see, yes.
Okay,
Experience-wise.
Yeah, similar to my colleague, I worked in performance management at the Sheriff's Department for 15 years. Okay, so I've seen many different things come and go, some good, some bad, and some ugly. But what I can say is the appointing authority has the ultimate decision, in my view, to make those decisions whether or not desirable should be included. Now, believe it or not, our intention isn't, I don't believe, what you mentioned, which is to commandeer any police department.
It's a trap we should avoid.
Allow me to finish. Our job is to highlight areas which we believe may avoid pitfalls for the department, right? So it's not where I'm sitting here saying, hey, let's list a bunch of desirables for you. No, absolutely not. I think we all have to be aware of the issues that go on in sworn departments, right? And we also have to be aware, maybe even at Glendale, lawsuits that the department has gone through pertaining to appointments. Is it my job to avoid those? Absolutely not. But as a member of the community, if I see a job bulletin for a lieutenant, if this was a sergeant's bulletin, I wouldn't care as much. I think once you get up to lieutenant and captain, I think having a desirable where the individual has worked in different units, that's not a bad idea. So my suggestion is an idea. It's not, and it's a recommendation. Recommendations, you can take them or you can leave them. But it's my job here to voice them, right? So My recommendation is to have desirables that will clearly articulate, because I can tell you, I worked with lieutenants who were blank slates when it came to discipline, and then they came into a unit, guy commits a misconduct, and he has no idea what that individual's rights are. Does he have Weingarter rights? Can he talk to him? Can he do a supervisory inquiry? When will the union get involved? Right? Why? Because he's never worked in any other place before. Right? Well, again, I worked for an organization that was 18,500 people. It's very different, right? But I can tell you this. What I'm saying is a recommendation, and it's a good faith recommendation on behalf of a citizen as a commissioner, on behalf to the department to say, this is something that you guys may want to take into consideration, because I do believe that there are pitfalls when it's not articulated. You'll still have your leeway. Okay, you still have your leeway, because if you have enough desirables, then technically that individual who's worked those units, whether he's liked or not, technically, right, if they're competing in an exam, should technically get that position, right? And so that's what my suggestion was, whether or not desirables should be included for a certain rank and higher. Again, sergeants, they're a little bit different. Once you get to the lieutenant rank and above, you have a lot of authority, especially in smaller organizations. I worked for an organization called the Office of Public Safety that had 600 sworn members. Okay, they were very small. They eventually merged into the sheriff's department, but at a lieutenant rank, they have a lot of authority. And so does the commission feel that the recommendation for the department to consider desirables is appropriate? The commission, I don't think, should sit down and articulate what those desirables should be. It should be for consideration.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes.
For this administration of this exam, the department is seeking a list for 1 year. Now, when we go through the competitive process, we have a defined rubric that we use to rank folks in the various categories. Deputy Chief Jenks did do a very good job at describing desirables. However, I would request that we move forward with this bulletin as written. Give us an opportunity to digest the feedback and instruct us perhaps to report out on the desirables, a full and complete list where we have an opportunity to engage the police chief as well on what that list should look like. I would ask that we not hold up this administration. What I have witnessed myself since Chief Sid joined our workforce a year and maybe 4 months ago or so, that he does an exceptional job getting out into the field, speaking to the rising sergeants about what he is going to expect should they compete in the competitive process. I would say of the 30-some-odd sergeants that are in the workforce, that if they intend to compete, they are clear on who's going to rise to the top in this competition should they apply. Furthermore, I am cautioned to include language, even if it's desirable, that would cause anyone to believe they cannot be included, because we're moving towards a culture change of more inclusivity. And sometimes people want to compete for the experience, and I would not want to include language at this juncture without having further time to digest it and think about it that would deter that competitive process. It's a competition, and I think that the best qualified of our sergeants are going to rise to the top in this competition. But we will gladly report back during the next administration of what desired traits, holistically should be considered without, deterring others from competing and including both men and women in the process.
Thank you. I want to clarify something. I am satisfied with Commissioner Hatamian's explanation. I had misunderstood you. I was of the mindset that we were now asking Deputy Chief Jenks to tell us what those desirables are and have it be stated right here on the record today. And that's why I was thinking like, well, okay, what are the desirables? So I could decide how to vote. But you articulated the desirables and you made it very clear, Commissioner Hatamian, that it is a recommendation that this body is making. And with that recommendation, I will add a recommendation of my own. I'd like to see lieutenants have master's degrees. Even though this says minimum requirements bachelor's, that means it's not, that's where it stops. I'd like it to be desirable that they have a master's degree. They're in management, for crying out loud. But I'm mindful of what our chief examiner, Ms. Adams, is saying. While we may think that a phrase highly desirable or a word desirable may not discourage some people, it indeed may discourage some people from applying altogether. So I think we've covered all of our concerns. I look forward to the feedback, as you promised, Ms. Adams. And if there are no other questions, let's move ahead. If there are,
just
I'll
a-
entertain it.
Yes, just small. I wanted to also say, I was also not making a recommendation that we add desirables. I was just giving a real-life example of what Commissioner Hatamian was explaining. I do see, right underneath the high school portion, it says intermediate post-certificate, but the next line says must possess supervisory and advanced post-certificate. Is that also inadvertently in there?
No, it says must.
intermediate?
No, it says must possess or be eligible and have applied for
Oh,
the
yes,
supervisory
thank you. Thank you
and
for that
advanced course
clarification.
certificate.
Okay, now I understand. Okay, I have no further questions.
If I may, just a quick question, if this clarifies anything. Under the other characteristics, would those,
What page are you, Commissioner?
on page 20,
Thank you.
under other characteristics, would those be more requirements or desirables?
You mean the willingness or,
Correct. And then the list of what they're willing to do is,
I looked for, the Deputy Chief can speak for himself, but I look at that as a requirement. You must be willing to, you know.
Chair Gazzari, members of the commission, I would interpret that to be an expectation that we would expect that a police lieutenant would initiate, recommend, and carry out personnel actions. It's a pretty basic part of the job. And you know, working necessary hours, obviously, we work 24/7, and it's an expectation that that a police lieutenant would carry out all of those duties.
Could we write, instead of the word other as the heading, as expected characteristics to clarify that? Because you're right, the commissioner was correct, it is a little vague on whether it's a requirement or expectation or desirable. Just as a suggestion for grammatical clarification purposes to put expected
You know,
characteristics.
this is what I don't want us to keep on doing. Now, for example, I can agree with you, Commissioner, when it says other characteristics, expected characteristics would be clearer. But when we look underneath, it says other characteristics, willingness to, and starts listing everything. So, I mean, so then if we're going to say expected characteristics, then we have to take willingness to out of it. I mean, it's fine, folks, it's fine. I'm going to exercise the chair's prerogative. If you want to make that change, I'll support the change. But if there are no other questions, I'd like to move to a vote. You want to make that change? Is that okay with you guys? Who makes the decision?
I prefer to keep the bulletin
As is?
as is.
That's fine. There you have it.
Okay, I will, thank you. I will move to approve this item.
Thank you. Any seconds?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Tamian,
Yes.
Commissioner Artunian,
yes.
Commissioner McGrabian,
Yes.
Commissioner Reen,
Yes.
Chair Gazarian.
Yes.
Chair
Thank
Gazarian,
you.
can I just get clarification? I think early on, we had a couple of items that had come up. Was there consensus on those? Or I remember, we went for so long, I'm not sure if we agreed on things like the common sense comment, and there was something else,
Just
if I
the high
remember.
agreed to
school,
keep
just
it.
the high
The high
school.
school. So the motion includes the removal of the language high school.
I will
because it-
clarify my motion.
Okay.
I move to approve the job bulletin with the one change, with the recommended one change to remove the high school requirement, which is the first line under education and training.
That is, for the record, under education and training, the line that currently states graduation from high school or attainment of GED or CHSPE certificate need no longer be there and should be removed. Yes, Ms. Adams.
Under experience, 2 years' experience as a current Glendale Police Sergeant, one of which must have been in patrol as a field supervisor.
With that additional modification, would that be your motion?
Yes,
Commissioner
that is my
Magrabi?
motion with those two modifications.
And can we just get the second, do you agree with those
I'm
modifications?
going to seek the second right now. Would you be seconding with those modifications?
Yes.
Yes. Roll call again, please.
Commissioner Hatamian,
Yes.
Commissioner Hartunian,
Yes.
Commissioner McGrabian,
Yes.
Commissioner Reen,
Yes.
Chair Gazarian.
Yes. Thank you. Next item, please. Thank you, Deputy Chief.
Revised class specification for approval, Public Works Administrator.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, before you for approval is the revised class specification for the position of Public Works Administrator. The current class specification was last updated 17 years ago, and it encompassed responsibilities such as assisting in the day-to-day operations of the Public Works Administration Division, supervising the department's community outreach efforts, overseeing human resources matters, aiding in budget preparation for division heads, and representing the director in the Public Works in their absence. The department is asking to update the job functions and the minimum qualifications to align with the current industry standards. Notably, the experience requirement will be adjusted to require 3 years of supervisory or management experience. This change is intended to attract highly skilled and qualified candidates. Additionally, we are updating the city's standard boilerplate language to ensure the consistency that we've talked about in all of our class specifications. On page 27 of the packet, you'll notice that Public Works Associate and Public Works Administrator are placed side by side. I would like to underscore to the commission that the Public Works Associate functions as an executive secretary to the Director of Public Works. Those two positions are not equivalent. So there is a distinction between the Public Works Associate and the Public Works Administrator. Having said that, the Glendale Management Association has been informed of the proposed changes, and they have not raised any concerns. Therefore, we do seek your approval to the revised class specification for Public Works Administrator as submitted. We have HR staff here, along with our interim Director of Public Works, Daniel Hernandez, and together they can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Any questions?
I do have just one comment. I wanted to say that this is very well written. Everything here is very clear, and the hierarchy is very clear. The explanations are very clear, and it is really a pleasure to read this one because I don't have questions or concerns or comments other than to thank you for especially the consistency and everything. It really is, for the way that I look at it, a wonderfully written specification.
I do want to piggyback on that. Kudos. I do appreciate the way it's written. It's written very, very well. I appreciate the master's degree as highly desirable. And all the other requirements that are listed are very appropriate. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? You will get no kudos from me because I expect it anyway. Thank you. Any motions?
I'll move to approve the item as provided.
Any second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please, Mr. Kwan.
Commissioner Tamian,
Yes.
Commissioner Artunian,
Yes.
Commissioner McGravian,
Yes.
Commissioner Reen,
Yes.
Chair Gazarian.
Yes, thank you. Next item, please.
Revised class specification for approval, electrician.
Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, before you for approval is the revised class specification for the position of electrician in the Public Works Department. This class specification was last updated in November 2011, and it outlines responsibilities for performing journey-level electrical work, including the installation, maintenance, and repair of wiring, control panels, motors, electrical equipment, and installations in city buildings and facilities, as well as on adjacent grounds. The department is proposing updating the job functions and minimum requirements to more accurately reflect the current duties as performed. Specifically, the department is suggesting removing the State of California General Electrician Certification requirement, which has become less relevant in the competitive job market today. This adjustment aims to broaden the pool of qualified candidates during the recruitment process. Additionally, the department is standardizing boilerplate language across the class specification to ensure consistency. The Glendale City Employees Association has been informed of these proposed revisions and has not expressed any concerns. Therefore, your approval is sought for the revised class specification of electrician as submitted. We have our Assistant Director of Public Works here, along with our HR analyst, and together they can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. I'm sure there's going to be questions, so any questions? Really? Because I could have sworn that there would be at least one question.
I had one question that
Go
was
for it.
answered. No, it was answered, so.
Was it answered? Okay.
It was the certification, because
Right.
I
I thought
wouldn't
so.
want someone without
The
a
certificate.
certification from the state to be working on government buildings that I and my family walk into and use, and all my friends and loved ones who live in Glendale and use Glendale services, and all of you folks who live, who work in these buildings. But if it's not relevant and there's some sort of a reason for it not being relevant anymore, then I understand. I'm not happy, but I understand.
So I'm going to try and make you happy, Commissioner McRobin, because I thought that you would have an issue with that, and as rightfully so, you should have had an issue with that. But in looking at the minimum requirements on page 30, which is page 2 of 3 of this particular job specification bulletin, I was heartened by reading 7 years of electrical wiring
I
experience.
saw that as well, yeah.
2 years of which must have been at the journey level. Experience performing journey level electrical work in a government, university, hospital, or other multi-facility environment is highly desirable. I like that it's highly desirable versus just desirable, and I will defer to your good judgment at HR. Any other questions? Commissioner Reem?
No.
Commissioner? No? 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 Any motions?
Motion to approve the bulletin.
Seconds?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Tamian,
Yes.
Commissioner Artunian,
Yes.
Commissioner McGravian,
Yes.
Commissioner Reen,
Yes.
Chair Gazarian.
Yes, thank you. Next item, please.
Job bulletin for approval, firefighter recruit, paramedic, lateral.
Thank you, Ms. Adams.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, before you is, for approval, is the job bulletin for the position of firefighter recruit paramedic lateral. This bulletin requires commission approval as it proposes modifications to the minimum requirements for this specific recruitment process. The proposed modifications for this recruitment are that the experience be elevated to being currently employed as a firefighter paramedic with a minimum of 1 year full-time professional experience in a municipal fire department. The fire department would like to see that the candidates have completed a certified paramedic program and a California Firefighter Academy or the equivalent. The fire department would also like to see all applicants to have a valid state of California paramedic license at the time of application. With an update to these areas, the Glendale Fire Academy will then provide a 6-week curriculum rather than the traditional 16-week course to train recruits on the Glendale-specific fire service techniques. This streamlined training reflects the higher level of entry qualifications and will expedite the transition of the academy graduates to the role of firefighter paramedic. This adjustment is expected to enhance service delivery as approximately 85% of our emergency calls are medical. Additionally, the shortened academy duration will reduce costs and eliminate the need for us to send candidates to paramedic school. Feedback from the Glendale Firefighters Association has already been incorporated into this proposal through our collaboration with the GFFA, the Fire Chief, and Human Resources. Therefore, we seek your approval of the proposed job bulletin for firefighter, recruit, paramedic, lateral as submitted. We have our Fire Chief, Greg Fish, here, along with staff from Human Resources, and together they can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Questions? No questions?
I do have one question. Again, this is more of like just educational question for myself in regards to desirable qualifications, right? So I know when we were looking at the Glendale PD bulletin, we kind of reached a consensus that there's criterias that are established for them to, you know, when they're going through the interview process, for them to make the best selection based on the qualifications that they deem to be desirable at that time. But then, as we went on, I noticed that on page 25, this was the Public Works Administrator job bulletin. On page 25, it had minimum requirements, and then under education, the master's degree was highly desirable, similar to what Chair Gazarian brought up, that he wished for it to be included in the Glendale PD job bulletin. And then as we go on, page 37 of this current examination that we are reviewing, desirable qualifications have their own heading underlined. So I'm just trying to understand, just for my own education, as to how the city determines how to list desirables, because in one instance, we didn't have any. In the second instance, on page 25, we have it, but it's listed under education. It doesn't have its own heading. And then on page 37, it has a heading.
So, Commissioner, Hatamian, we are in the process of trying to leverage technology better in the HR department by adding newer modules to our NeoGov system. We've been working on this project for well over a year, and in short order, we will be asking the City Council to dispense with competitive bidding so we can move that project along in a more rapid fashion. When I joined the organization, we had a team of 6 recruiters. That team is down to 3. And so of our 15 departments, those 3 people work with different department heads who within their departments have ideas about what is required, desirable, and highly desirable. We receive your feedback, and we're trying to use the technology, so across the staff, they're using the same templates. Unfortunately, we're just not quite there yet. So sometimes when I'm reading the material, something might pop out at me, and then I'll ask the party to go back and make that modification. I don't always catch those things, but we do plan to have them all caught in time through leveraging technology better. Now, in my department, I may have a more reliance upon educational components than other department heads, but I trust the department heads as the designated hiring manager for the city manager on their level of expertise for their departments. So you will see feedback from some departments look a little different than others, whether they're in public works, fire, HR, police. We're different people who have our own employment histories coming to the table with something we believe will work within our departments. But our long-term goal is, as we have spoken, to build in more consistency around all of the material we bring before you. We're just not quite there yet.
Thank you, Ms. Adams, for that. I know it's very difficult as a centralized unit to be able to direct so many different department heads to ensure that everybody's sort of employing the same standards, and when they come to you for consultation and you provide them with templates and so on, which leads me to my next question. Desirable qualifications. Does Glendale HR foresee that as a component in its bulletins? Is that going to be a heading, or is it going to be up to the department heads whether or not they're going to have a desirable or not? Or is HR going to say, hey, above a certain rank, whether it's lieutenant or in the civilian world, equivalent to a lieutenant and above, maybe desirables should be recommended by HR? And again, my question is more so when we review these bulletins and we look at desirables, I for one see that it excludes anyone. I don't think it discourages people, to be frank with you. I think what it does is it allows people to be educated as to what they need to do to get to the next level. So if, let's say, a desirable is for someone to have worked in a certain unit, and I'm reviewing that, and let's say I can qualify because I meet the minimum requirements, I might put my hat in the ring and just apply, go through the interview process as an experience. But I might not get selected because I may not have the desirables, and/or I may have some other desirables and I may get selected, which may be a master's. So my question is, how is HR foresee the desirables component to be within these bulletins so we can see some consistency?
Right, so it would be my expectation that all of the feedback that we get from the commission is those questions are consistently asked to the hiring manager so that we are eliciting feedback amongst the education, the requirements, the desired, the highly desired, similar to the feedback that we got from Commissioner Wren when we're talking about FLSA, exempt versus non-exempt. And now we have 5 pages of standard questions that we're asking to ensure that things are being placed in its proper category. So my expectation is that we're going to build on a consistent set of questions so that all of these materials are more standardized, and we have thought about each of those different areas to be incorporated or not.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. It sounds like the desirables component, it's still up for discussion, whether or not it's gonna be included in the bulletins.
It is still up for discussion. We have weekly recruitment meetings led by one of our deputy managers who unfortunately could not be with us this evening. Hopefully at our next meeting, she will be present, and then she can speak specifically to where she is with the team and moving that forward.
Thank you.
I just echo.
What?
I just want to, I didn't comment extensively during the last discussion of the desirable qualities or how it's phrased, but I just want to echo Commissioner Atamian's comments. I think the department should really consider that the inclusion of the desirable characteristics or traits, I don't know how it's listed here. We all know life is about incentives. I think it should become I think over time, everybody will know and should know what the desirable characteristics and the traits are of an applicant, of the members of the department. We trust that the hiring body have their own process of going through and looking for those desirable characteristics, but the candidates and the members of the department, I think everybody should know what the desirable characteristics are, and people should strive for it, and especially for those high-ranking positions, especially for those dealing with safety of the community, of the people. I also don't believe it should discourage anyone from applying if you have, again, it's life is, some people always strive for more and some will never do. So we should reward those who strive to have more qualifications and do the best job they can do for a given position.
Yes, I received that feedback. And as a city, we are moving through a culture shift. And as changes are implemented, we are taking a lot of time and speaking with our unions about the changes. It's a change management process, and it's a change of the previous culture as well, but we're working through all of that.
Any other questions?
Yes, it's sort of relates to what we're talking about. For example, for under characteristics on page 38, for a paramedic, an applicant must be of good moral character. I agree. At the same time, in the police department, not we all, it's me because I live this in my life, but it's ingrained in me that sworn officers are held to a higher standard of behavior. So and it's also a willingness. I don't know if it's a willingness to be of good moral character, but I'm not sure why that wasn't in the lieutenant position and why it's here. So I feel like sometimes, and like you said, Ms. Adams, some department heads think to put that in there because that for them is really important, but other departments in similar positions don't put that in there. And so it becomes a little bit less consistent for us sitting here reviewing every one of them. And as each department head looks at what's important to them. And if we don't voice our observations here, they might not know that, oh, maybe I should put good moral character, good idea, fire department, I should put it in my police department too. So I feel like we're not criticizing or dictating what the departments should do, we're observing. We're observing and saying that is a really nice thing to put under other characteristics. So similarly, why is that not in the other departments? For example, in the police department. So it's just another observation that I have that I like this item. I think it's really important to keep it in there. And for consistency's sake, just an observation to potentially discuss adding it in other departments.
So let me chime in. The police department specification that we seem to be going back to was a promotional specification from sergeant to lieutenant. And I assure you, if one has a blemish of the magnitude of a moral character, they would not be promoted to lieutenant. Let's not get caught up in this forest. Please, folks, this is a open promotion, and perhaps somebody who is a paramedic, EMT, whatever the actual position is, firefighter, recruit, in another department, wants to come to the city of Glendale, but they have perhaps suffered a petty theft or some other crime of moral turpitude. This is essentially saying, listen, you must be willing to be of good moral character. That's sort of a stop sign. If you got a criminal history, maybe we're not going to consider you. You can reword it some other way, but I'm mindful of promotional versus open. The promotional clearly will not be promoting from within those who have those types of issues. So I see that we are now going towards a trend of wanting to see all job specifications have all the same way, but that really makes it sound like all 1,000 or 1,500 city employees have the same duties and responsibilities, and I just know that they don't, and we all know that they don't. I think it's good to put it in there when it's called for. Here it's called for. I don't think it was called for in the promotion from sergeant to lieutenant.
Respectfully, I disagree, because willingness to is a future item, not a past item. It doesn't say you must not have a history of poor moral character, which is the history item that Chief Kazarian mentioned. Willingness is a future thing. And if we're hiring a future lieutenant, I would like to see a lieutenant who's willing to have good moral character in the future.
It's not a future thing. I respectfully disagree back with you, Commissioner McRobbin, because a willingness to means preparedness and expectation that you must be of good moral character. It says applicants must be of good moral character. Must is mandatory. It's not permissive. It's not may. There's a code section that specifically addresses what must means, what may means, and what shall means. The willingness to being of good moral character is, if you haven't been of good moral character, you already disqualify yourself. We can tell them, take out willingness. Other characteristics, don't say willingness. Say applicants must be of good moral character. But that line, applicants must be of good moral character, trumps the willingness to be. Because I can say, yeah, I'm willing to be of good moral character. And then I'm going to be told, but you know what? You've suffered a conviction of a crime involving moral turpitude. So your willingness doesn't really mean much because you already have a blemish. Again, we can do this, and I've seen us do this over the years here. I just caution us not to get caught up in the forest and get stuck in here with these things, because we can do this. These meetings are increasingly going to take longer and longer because all of us, I have plenty to say here, but I know that there's a reasonable explanation for everything that I have to say, so I try and be very guarded about when and if I want to say something about an item. That's just my experience. It's okay for us to disagree. I don't mean to disagree for the sake of disagreeing. I just mean to disagree so that I can, when I leave this dais, you'll know a year or 2 or 4 later, yeah, now I know what he was saying, because you will be doing this over and over again and you're going to get frustrated. It's going to keep coming back, and it's never going to be uniform. It just will not. It's never been uniform in 12 years. I suspect it wasn't uniform the 12 years prior to my being here, and I don't think it's going to be uniform the 12 years after I leave here.
Chair Kazarian, if I may, just very, very briefly. So I think when we're dealing with higher level positions, I think there needs to be a good level of scrutiny, right? So we're not dealing with low level position. But I also think, this commission should not be the clearinghouse. We should not be correcting inconsistencies or, when there's simple things as a GED or a bachelor's degree, it's presumed that there's going to be a GED. The commission is supposed to look to see whether or not, the job bulletins reflect what the community desires, right? What the community standards are. And I feel like, we heard from Ms. Adams that they're in this transitional phase, right? And, the transitional phase is great, and there's always room for improvement. But for consistency's sake, and Ms. Adams knows better as to how HR is gonna process these moving forward, but somebody within HR needs to look at all of these and see whether or not they are consistent. Because I remember when I first came on my second term around, we were looking at headers, and the headers were in different places.
Yep.
Okay, well, in my personal opinion, the commission should not be making those types of corrections. I do think that there's a lot of room to improve, just like in my daily work. We're constantly striving to do better. And I do think that, like, when you're dealing with certain classifications, let's say a lieutenant, or even in this case, firefighter, recruit, there should be a set of desirables, a set of qualifications, minimum requirements that's put on shared points where everybody can share and look at and consider and provide that as feedback to the department heads. Hey guys, this is what we've done in the past. And somebody centralized within HR has to review all of these so they can see it's consistent. There's no reason for me, I know EHR or NeoGov, I understand how those systems work. But if somebody at HR, and I'm not trying to say this doesn't happen in my daily life, it does all day long. It's very difficult to write a document. It's very easy and a little bit, foolish and cowardly to point out all the little mistakes, right? Because it happens in my life. But I can tell you that there's no reason for me to swift through different exams or different things that were submitted and see desirable in one, and then see a desirable for a master's listed in a different way, and then be told that a desirable was not included because the attempt was not to discourage people, right? I personally agree with my colleague sitting to my right, directly to my right, that I think there is room to improve. And I think to say that, oh, it's been this way and it's going to remain this way and it's going to go on, I don't know. I'm not of that mindset. I'm not of that character. I have 2 teams that report to me currently. On a daily basis, we discover errors. On a daily basis, we correct them. And this is ongoing. It's a struggle, and I work directly in HR, so I know. Okay, so it's a struggle. I get it, but I think there's room to improve. I think Ms. Adams did shed a lot of light on that, which I appreciate. And I do think that if somebody just within HR looks at these, I don't think they'll miss it because we're not missing it, that headings are in different places. I think that would be helpful. And so moving forward, we're hoping that we can provide that feedback in order for us to work as a team. I think when we have department heads standing up in front of us, I don't ever want them to think that I'm here to articulate to them on what they need to write. I want them to understand that the advice that I'm giving is because I've seen huge pitfalls, huge lawsuits, grievances, group grievances, issues come up where it could be easily addressed ahead of time. And I'm hoping that we can have that consensus and that working relationship, because it's not about, for me, again, very difficult to write a document, very easy to point at little errors here and there. But I do respect the work that you guys are doing, and I am looking forward in working with you guys closely so we can improve things as we go along.
Thank you, Commissioner Hatamian. Lest the record be not clear, let me be clear. When I say what things have been like the 12 years and what things will be like the 12 years that follow and what they were perhaps like the 12 years prior to my being here, I don't mean that as a negative observation. I mean that as a positive observation. And what I mean by that is that we cannot, and I disagree with anyone who thinks we can or we should, expect a city with 15 departments to put out job specifications that mirror one another. That to me, I'm not in your lines of work, but I'm using my common sense, and my common sense only takes me as far as making that observation, that I am going to yield to the departments that present their job specifications, welcoming my fellow commissioners' remarks, as I hope that they welcome mine when I make them. But at the end of the day, to suggest that a fire department ought to operate the exact same way as a police department, or public works ought to operate the exact same way as the library, and should have the same requirements, the same way, the template is forgive me, and I really like and respect every one of you. I just don't want to be finding myself in a place where I feel like we are nitpicking. We are not nitpicking, but I'm cautioning us not nitpick. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
I do want to clarify that I never said that fire and public works and any other department should be the same, but fire and police are very similar in higher standards of behavior requirements, and that was the only point I was making with one item that I saw that I felt would be really good to include in one for fire as well. I also wanted to say, in my life, in my entire life, I have held positions where I have been the grammar check and the spelling check for everyone if I do that in my life right now. So if I see that there's a typo, I'm going to tell you all, is it my job? Am I supposed to know? But it is a sign of respect and a teamwork to say, I think we put a line here by accident. Is it by accident? It is to be helpful, not critical. It is not to nitpick. It is, we're here approving something, and if I see that something that may be here inadvertently done as a sign of helpfulness, I will mention it. It's a sign of respect.
Your point is well taken.
Thank you.
My comments were not directed at you.
I never took it personally. I just want to clarify.
Okay, so my comments are directed at every one of us, including at myself. It helps when I hear myself say it. It kind of compels me to practice it. Thank you all. If there is a motion, if there's any modifications with, to a motion with modifications, let me know.
I do believe this specification is well-written, and I think thank whoever wrote it and participated in it, and I will make a motion to approve it as presented.
Is there a second?
I will second.
There are 2 seconds. You can,
It's a second.
a third? Commissioner Hatamian is the second. I will go with that. Thank you.
Thank
Roll
you.
call, please.
Commissioner Atamian,
Yes.
Commissioner Artunian,
Yes.
Commissioner McGrabian,
Yes.
Commissioner Reen,
Yes.
Chair Gazarian.
Yes, thank you. Next item, please.
Reports and information, employee job performance evaluations past due aging report.
As to aging report, I never heard it referred to as aging report. Thank you. Ms. Adams?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, before you is an informational report on performance evaluation and the return status for the City of Glendale's employees. As you can see, the response rate is very good. At the time of the agenda's posting, there was one evaluation on the second notice list. It's in my department. I will give the employee their performance evaluation once they return from vacation. And so by next month, you will see that that has been eliminated. If the commission has any questions, there are no other evaluations on the second notice list. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, this is a note and file item.
Thank you. Any questions? No questions? Thank you. Next item, please.
Closed session.
Actually, may I stop you? Ms. Barbetian, because I know after closed session, we don't go back. Should we take item number 13 before item 12?
We can.
Okay, can you please take item 13 before item 12?
Civil Service Commission staff comments.
Thank you. Any comments?
I have a comment.
Please.
I'd just like to report out to the commission on the subject of FLSA exemptions, that the staff did a look-back period over the last 2 years. We sent a dozen of our descriptions to our outside legal counsel for their analysis to ensure that we have identified the exemptions correctly. Once we get that feedback, we will report out on those status. Additionally, the same firm has provided the HR team with a multi-page survey, which will confirm our analysis going forward. We have one staff person on our team who primarily conducts internal investigations, although their inventory right now is very low. They also happen to be a licensed attorney. So for the time being, going forward, they will do the analysis for the entire team until we can get the law firm out here to do refresher training for some, beginning training for others, to confirm that we are properly identifying the FLSA exempt versus non-exempt correctly going forward.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I do have some comments, if I may.
Please.
Shortly, please. I'd like to share some parting comments, actually, as my term on this commission has come to its end, and I just want to share my sentiments and my gratitude for being part of this commission, for the work we have done together, for the experience, for the privilege and the pleasure I've experienced, for the lessons I've learned from my co-commissioners, from the staff, from our council over the years. When I started 4 years ago, it was right in the beginning of the COVID, so we have gone through a lot together with our prior co-commissioners and the current co-commissioners. It truly has been a pleasure. It's been a privilege. I'm staying in the city. I'll be around. I'll be a friend, I promise. And I just want to thank everyone. I want to wish you all the best. And thank you all for a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you. I was hoping you were going to forget and not say anything, so you would stay, because I do know that I don't think the city council has selected, voted, or appointed someone to occupy the seat that you currently occupy. So I was hopeful that you would remain until such time that they would, but I do know that you are an extremely busy practicing attorney with engagements away from the county and rushing to get back to these meetings, as you have many times, for which I am grateful. I am very grateful. I have been with you the entire 4 years, and I must say you have been an absolute delight, and I will miss you for however long I still am on this dais, and I'll certainly look you up in the city. Thank you for your
Chair.
service.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hartunian, it was a pleasure serving with you. Good luck to you on your next chapter.
Thank you. Thank you.
I ditto those comments, Commissioner Hartunian. Although short, it was a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ream?
Well, I barely know.
You don't have to repeat what they said.
Too much excess. We've met twice, but it's been a pleasure. And I hope to meet you in the future.
I hope so, too.
Socially, and we'll see you around town.
I hope to, at some point, give you something to opine about me.
And I bet you can give us good advice going forward, too.
Sometimes no comments are meant as
I'll
a
take it.
compliment as
I'll
well.
take it.
So Commissioner Ream had it right
Thanks,
in the first
everyone.
place.
It's really
Sorry
been
to
a-
put you on the spot. I just thought, hey, everybody's saying something. All right.
It's been a great experience.
thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Thank you all. Well, what do we do now? We go to the next item, yeah? Next item, please.
Closed session, public employee discipline, housing technician.
Thank you. Again, I will never get this right. We will now go off the air, but we will report out, but not on the air. Thank you.
You got it. That's good.
We 12 years together.
It's like an